Bangladeshi prosecutors accuse former leader Sheikh Hasina of crimes against humanity during an uprising last year. But with her in exile in India, what are the chances she'll face justice back home? And why is the future of Bangladesh's caretaker government looking uncertain? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Fugitive and former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, has officially been charged with crimes against humanity. Prosecutors in Dhaka accused the 77-year-old of orchestrating a systematic attack on demonstrators during protests last year that ended her 15-year rule. Hasina remains in self-imposed exile in neighboring India and has rejected the charges as politically motivated. Bangladesh's interim leader, Muhammad Yunus, has promised to ensure Sheikh Hasina and other key figures face justice. But his caretaker government is facing discord over when it will hold elections. So, will Sheikh Hasina face trial, and will Bangladeshis forgive Muhammad Yunus if she doesn't? We'll get to our panel of guests in a moment, but first, this report by Amma Boateng.
It's been nearly 1 year since violence and protests shook Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka. Yet for many people, the memories still feel raw. The country's International Crimes Tribunal has charged then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina with crimes against humanity. Prosecutors accuse the 77-year-old of being directly responsible for ordering a systematic attack that led to mass killings during the crackdown last summer.
This trial is not for revenge. Rather, it's a promise for the future and to give the next generation a safe Bangladesh. We said that this trial will be emotion-free, evidence-based, fact-based, impartial and fair.
Unrest began after students organised protests last June against a quota system that reserved 30% of government jobs for descendants of war veterans, saying it favoured the governing Awami League party. By mid-July, the protest escalated into violence and Hasina's government launched a crackdown. The UN says up to 1,400 people may have been killed. In early August, Prime Minister Hasina resigned and fled the country, ending her 15-year rule. A few days later, an interim government was formed, led by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus. Its members were tasked with restoring peace and preparing for elections. But political instability continues, with protesters opposing the makeup of the interim government and the nature of reforms, and calling for early elections. Earlier this week, interim leader Muhammad Yunus renewed a plea to parties to resolve differences. But pressure is mounting on the streets. Last week, student supporters of one of the main political parties, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, marched to demand elections in December. Yunus says polls could be held then, but is pushing for June 2026 to give the government more time to enact reforms. Yet demonstrators on the street may not have the patience nor trust to wait that long. Amma Boateng, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guests. Rumeen Farhana is Assistant Secretary for International Affairs of the Central Executive Committee and former Member of Parliament for the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. She joins us from Dhaka. Sreeradha Datta is professor at OP Jindal Global University. She joins us from Panaji in southwest India. And joining us from London is Abbas Faiz. He's an independent South Asia researcher with a focus on Bangladesh. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Rumeen, let me start with you today. How significant is the fact that this tribunal and case is actually taking place in Bangladesh now?
You see, Sheikh Hasina was charged for her systematic brutality and crime against humanity that she has done in August and July 2024. And at that time, she killed more than 1,400 people and injured more than 24 to 25,000 people. If you see the report of UN, you can clearly see how brutal and systematic that attack was. And this tribunal has been formed in order to get a free, fair, and neutral trial. I have seen the statement made by the Chief prosecutor, where he has made it absolutely clear that this trial will be free and fair and no vengeance will be showed against the ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. So, we are hoping for the best.
Rumeen, let me also ask you, Bangladesh's interim leader, Muhammad Yunus, he's promised to ensure that Sheikh Hasina and other key figures who have been charged, that they will face justice. What's the reaction that you're seeing thus far in Bangladesh to these proceedings? Do people believe that this actually means that Sheikh Hasina and other figures that have been charged will actually face justice?
You see, the trial has just begun, so it is too early to make a comment. Normally, it takes more than years to complete a trial in Bangladesh. So in that sense, it's just the beginning. Let's see how it goes. But I find it extremely difficult to bring her back in Bangladesh, and as well as her party members, because all are exiled. Most of them are now in India. So we really don't know how the government will be able to bring them back. So that's the major question, I guess.
Sreeradha, what Rumeen was just talking about is what I wanted to ask you about as well, because Bangladesh has already requested India to extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh. There will now be a renewed attempt at a higher diplomatic level. You've written that the, quote, likelihood of India agreeing to extradite Hasina is low, and that although a bilateral extradition treaty exists, the caveats are significant. Why is that the case, and why do you think it's unlikely that India would extradite Sheikh Hasina?
First and foremost, India would argue that it's a political decision that India will take, and not as per the bilateral agreement, which of course has some conditions to it. What India's argument here would be that the atmospherics in Bangladesh is not conducive to holding a neutral and a fair trial. That's the first and foremost. So it is a very biased atmosphere there, and the interim government or the other political parties are very invested in trying to see her accused. So she will be denied a fair trial. I think it is on basis of that India is going to refuse her extradition.
Sreeradha, let me also ask you about the state of the relationship between India and Bangladesh. Obviously, there are tensions. What is the state of relations right now, currently, between the two countries, and how much of a factor will Sheikh Hasina play in the future of those relations?
Sheikh Hasina and India worked very closely, as is known to all. So post the interim taking over, India has been, I have used the word indifferent. There are certain matters which is business as usual going on, but largely the large engagement that India is to enjoy with Bangladesh, which included medical tourism, which included a huge robust trade and commerce, that has almost come to a standstill. I mean, for argument's sake, there would be some, SOS medical visas being issued, and there's some basic trade going on. But a lot of the goodwill gestures India had given Bangladesh earlier for ensuring much more, robust trade and commerce, that has come to a standstill. And what we've understood here is that Bangladesh and India, I mean, they do maintain some kind of a diplomatic engagement, but it is really at the lowest ever. And I don't think India is likely to change anything until the elections are held, free and fair and inclusive elections, as they keep arguing for.
Abbas, Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal has charged Sheikh Hasina with crimes against humanity. And in July of last year, Hasina's government launched a crackdown on the protests. The UN says that up to 1,400 people may have been killed. What are some of the other allegations against Sheikh Hasina, and what was the state of human rights in Bangladesh under her rule?
The state of human rights in Bangladesh is under Sheikh Hasina was very unhappy, and there were a lot of concerns. 1 year into her rule, when she first became the prime minister, she won the elections. She started to actually crack down on the institutions of the state that were responsible for creating a democratic process, a fair trial, and judicial processes that were acceptable to international human rights defenders. But so, I mean, for example, the election commissioner was changed, the chief justice was changed, the kind of rules were actually brought to crack down on the demonstrators, the digital rules were actually issued to stop freedom of expression. But during the 15 years of her rule, we are not just talking about the atrocities that took place under Sheikh Hasina, under orders from Sheikh Hasina in July and August 2004. We are talking about, extrajudicial executions. We are talking about enforced disappearances, and we have evidence of all of this. Some of those people who had been held in what is called the mirror house, which were rooms really surrounded, the walls were covered by mirrors, and these people were actually held there for something like 11 years. And those are really crimes that were committed under the rule of Sheikh Hasina. So she has actually committed crimes against humanity. She's got to be brought to justice. But whether the International Crimes Tribunal can do that, that's another question.
Well, Abbas, let me interrupt you. You bring up the International Crimes Tribunal, and that's what I wanted to ask you about next. What can you tell us about that body? It was Sheikh Hasina who set up that tribunal, correct? And has it not faced in the past allegations or accusations of political bias? What has its function been in the past? And also, how do these proceedings go forward in light of the fact that Sheikh Hasina and others who have been charged are absent?
Absolutely. The International Crimes Tribunal, there were serious concerns. I myself, in my position both as a senior person within the structures of Amnesty International, have raised serious concerns about the fact that the International Crimes Tribunal at the time of Sheikh Hasina had bypassed the rules that enforced that evidence should be acceptable, evidence should be usable, evidence should be provable. And none of these were taken into account. People were accused by just simply someone talking about, seeing them with somebody, something like, 30 years ago, and they were actually sentenced to serious lengths of imprisonment. So, that was the problem with the International Crimes Tribunal. The judgment of the International Crimes Tribunal could not be challenged before the High Court because that layer of challenge had been actually removed by Sheikh Hasina. The Supreme Court was not in a position, as we know now. The Supreme Court is actually, they are themselves rejecting the judgments that were passed at the time of Sheikh Hasina by the Supreme Court against the judgment of the International Crimes Tribunal. So there is a problem. But in fact, Mohammed, if I may just say that, from the very beginning, I myself, with my friend and colleague, Michael Pollack, who has had really a lot of work done on Bangladesh in the past, we wrote to the interim government and we suggested that the best way to actually try these crimes was to pass the case to the International Crimes Tribunal, International Criminal Court in The Hague.
Abbas, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let me pick up on that point with you in just a minute. I want to bring Rumeen back into the conversation before I address that point with you. Rumeen, there is pressure in Bangladesh building on interim leader Muhammad Yunus. Demonstrators and protesters who have been demanding that elections happen in December of this year. Now, Yunus has said in the past that elections could be held then, but he's also said that June of next year is a better time so that more government reforms can be enacted before an election would take place. Do you think it's at all possible that elections could actually happen by December of this year?
Of course, why not? We asked Dr. Muhammad Yunus from our party that please show us at least one reason why we could not hold the election in December this year, but no plausible reason has been shown. And unfortunately, the people of Bangladesh, they couldn't vote for the last 15 years. during Hasina regime, there was no election at all. All the elections were rigged, ballot boxes were stuffed before the election and stuff like that. So people are really eagerly waiting for an election. And that is the reason why you can see this large protest on the streets. And Dr. Muhammad Yunus, who is talking about these reforms and this trial process, one thing needs to be clear at the outset, because you see, reforms is a continuous process. You cannot do all the reforms in 2, 3, or 6 months. It is a continuous process, and it will take its place, in the way. But in order to delay the election using reform and justice as a cause is not the right thing to do. So all the political parties, they're creating pressure on Yunus. At the same time, the people of Bangladesh, they're also, talking about an early election, like by December this year.
Rumeen, I don't want to get too much into the realm of speculation, but let's say that elections don't happen by December of this year. Is it a likely timetable that they would definitely happen by June of 2026, or could you foresee a scenario by which it gets delayed even further?
It could be delayed even further, because if you delay it for 6 months from December, why won't you delay it even further if you really think that you want to remain in power? If you see, in last 10 months, more than 10 months have already passed, and we haven't seen an iota of reform yet. We haven't seen the trial has just begun. So how long we can wait for these reforms and the trial process to be finished? So I don't think that that's a real cause for delaying the election from December.
Sreeradha, let me get your perspective. If there is a final decision and announcement about when elections will take place in Bangladesh, is that something that could potentially make the situation just slightly better between Bangladesh and India going forward?
Yes, certainly, I would think so. There is, I guess, an expectation from some of the political parties that early elections would be something that is more welcome. But I must add here that there are certain political parties, especially the new just recently organized NCP, which is basically led by the student leaders. And there are some other political parties also, just like Jamaat and others, who are preferring a delayed date. But again, coming back to that, whether it's going to be held in December or, Professor Yunus has actually said that he's not going to spend a day more than 30th June of next year. So clearly between December and June, we are expecting elections to happen. But I've often spoken about and written about this, that once elections are declared, I'm not saying that things are going to, change drastically between India and Bangladesh, but certainly the stoniness, the indifference that exists will possibly be there, but at least the intention for the interim government to hold election will convey a very positive message to India. And I think things will start slowly. I don't think it's going to be easy to go back to the kind of bonhomie kind of relationship that India enjoyed with Awami League. It's going to take time to build. Doesn't matter which elected government comes in. But yes, I think will be certainly a better and a less cold situation than what it is just now. Because I think there is a question of not really understanding the intention of the interim here. And once the interim does announce election, clearly that they would be on the way out, and a free and fair and inclusive election would be definitely welcomed by India.
Sreeradha, when it comes to India and Bangladesh, if the relationship starts to warm going forward, is there any scenario you think that exists in which India at some point would agree to extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh? At some point, does she become a political liability or just too much political baggage in India?
I don't think so. Even if, just for argument's sake, let's say whichever political party comes in and takes over, and India and Bangladesh share a very positive relationship. But I think the relationship that India shares with Awami League, and in this case Sheikh Hasina herself, is something very special. I mean, not only because she's Mujibur Rahman's daughter who led Bangladesh to liberation war and to freedom, what they enjoy today, but also because if you recall, there was a situation in Bangladesh when there was a military leaders, and Sheikh Hasina had to stay back in India for almost 5 years or more because she was not welcome in her own homeland. So, and then of course, ever since she took over in 2009, and most importantly, let me address this here, that of all the other governments that have existed in Bangladesh, which has generally been a BNP-led government or a Awami-led government, it is Awami League, especially under Sheikh Hasina when she took over in 2009 January, she addressed India's core concern, which is security. We've seen India suffer tremendously on that aspect when, the previous government, which was a BNP-led government during 2001 and 2006, India suffered very much on that account. So when Sheikh Hasina took over, she completely changed that. And it is from there that India started building on that relationship, and from line of credit to cross, border connectivity, energy trade, all kinds of things started unfolding, which Bangladesh and India had never been able to do before. So clearly, I mean, India holds Sheikh Hasina in a very special place, not only for the history, but also for the kind of, engagement that she's been able to do with India. So I very much doubt that even if we do enjoy a very good relation with the next elected government, Sheikh Hasina will always be India's guest.
Abbas, I interrupted you before, and I
never a liability. Is that sorry?
Sure. Abbas, I interrupted you before. I appreciate your patience. You were starting to talk about the International Criminal Court. Now, the interim government of Bangladesh has sought the involvement of the International Criminal Court in prosecuting Sheikh Hasina. I know that you've written that the ICC in The Hague is the most reliable judicial body for the purpose of investigation and prosecution of serious crimes. Do you think that it's likely that the ICC would take this up?
Well, I think the first thing would be for the government to actually approach the ICC seriously and forward the cases. That would be really in the interest of the interim government. It would be in the interest of justice. It would be in the interest of the country. Because first of all, the ICC is an objective process. And also the resources that the government of Bangladesh, the interim government of Bangladesh, can actually use in order to extradite Sheikh Hasina, which will probably not happen in the end. That would have been safe. So that would have been better for the country. Also, the evidence that is prepared by the International Criminal Court would be used in a process of national reconciliation, which would be also very good for Bangladesh and for the processes that will be taking place after that. But at the moment, we don't really know because the government has not forwarded the case to the International Criminal Court. I know that Mr. Karim Khan has been to Bangladesh and he has actually expressed some interest in really dealing with the case. But as far as I know, the government has not formally forwarded any cases to the ICC, which is unfortunate in my opinion.
Abbas, if I could ask for more of a legalese opinion here when it comes to trying to seek the assistance of the ICC. I mean, what exactly needs to happen? What are the steps that need to be taken? And what are the types of alleged crimes that need to be referred to the ICC in order for them to take a more active role potentially going forward?
Well, the crimes that need to be taken up by the ICC are under the statute of the International Criminal Court. So they are labeled as crime against humanity. And those would be, all the crimes that took place in July and in August in Bangladesh would fall under that category. For example, the killings, which are extrajudicial killings. We know people who have been actually raising their hands in front of the police, and they were actually shot dead. I personally saw bodies of people who had been tortured in a police van and they were thrown in the streets. So, I mean, there were just loads of evidences of torture and killing, unlawful killing, civilian killing, that are actually coming under the crimes against humanity. And those would have been taken up by the ICC. Now, one good thing about the government of Bangladesh, the interim government, forwarding the case to the ICC is that it would not go through the pre-trial chamber of the ICC. It would be Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the ICC, would be able to actually take up the case directly. And we have actually let the interim government know all of this, but unfortunately, that hasn't happened. This means that the case hasn't yet been actually forwarded to the ICC.
Rumeen, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I want to ask you about another development in Bangladesh. Bangladesh's Supreme Court cleared the path for the Jamaat-e-Islami party to regain its registration as a political party after a decade. As I understand it, that decision would enable the party to take part in elections going forward. What kind of impact might that have on the political scene in Bangladesh?
Jamaat is a political party which has its own followers and supporters and members. So definitely they will contest in the election, and if they, get vote, they will win some seats in the parliament. But obviously, I'm very sure that history, if you see the history, it's very clear that they're not going to win more than 20 to 25 seats at best.
Sreeradha, political instability continues in Bangladesh right now. Do you expect that the protests that have been happening there, that they will grow? And if so, what happens then? What happens when it comes to, from your vantage point, what's going on in Bangladesh, and also when it comes to the relationship between India and Bangladesh?
So in terms of the protests and in terms of, I think the first and foremost, need of the hour is to ensure law and order. That's what we've seen ever since August, that, it's been really torn apart at different seams. So once they declare elections, it's a possibility, and if they declare elections earlier than later, there's a possibility that the same youth group who are wanting a delayed election will come to the streets again. We've seen how the country has been held ransacked with, youth. I constantly salute the youth for, what they did, their ability to change the political landscape in August. But ever since then, I have no hesitation to say this, that somehow there's been impression here, and I use the term mobocracy, that Bangladesh has been taken over by mobocracy, as if you just come out of the streets and throw in any demand that you want, and it's going to be addressed and taken up by the government. I think that's a bad culture that we are seeing there, and whichever government takes over after this is going to have to deal with that.
Rumeen, do you think that Muhammad Yunus has the support that he needs politically right now to continue to try to enact the reforms that he's promised?
We are trying our best to support this government. When this government was formed, the acting chairman of Bangladesh Nationalist Party made it absolutely clear that this government is our government, and we will extend our support as much as we can. But if the government thinks that they have the mandate to delay the election, they have the mandate to be in power as long as they want to, then they are making the biggest mistake of their lifetime, because people are really eager for a free, fair election. And this interim government is interim. That means it works as a bridge between the two elected governments, and it cannot last forever.
All right, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to all of our guests, Rumeen Farhana, Sreeradha Datta, and Abbas Faiz. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.